In this video, we're finishing up part 2 of the CompTIA Security Plus, section 1.6, covering vulnerability types. Hi everybody, welcome to StudioSec. Thank you for watching. Like this video if it's helpful, comment down below, especially if you're setting for the Security Plus. I will cheer you on, and subscribe for more content. I'm posting more every week, including more Security Plus content. Now we're just gonna jump right in with vulnerable business processes. This is a fun one, Now this you can actually identify with a risk assessment, and we will be talking about risk assessments soon. But you want to make sure that you are looking into the business processes that your business is employing. You are not basically getting lazy with your business processes. You want to make sure that you are looking for when data enters and leaves your organization, who it goes to. You want to look at, who's handling data when and where. And where are the insecurities? Is your business following best practices when it comes to certain processes? But those are things we'll talk more in depth on the risk assessment video that's coming. Next is weak cipher suites and implementations. Now this can be a big one, especially if your company is running basically a bunch of potatoes for its network infrastructure. And the reason I say that is because stronger cipher suites can be a bit more resource intensive. And so if your company basically hasn't invested in its network infrastructure of late, then you're probably going to run into some issues with weak cipher suites. So you want to make sure that you're running the latest whenever it comes to encryption versions, different hash versions. Yes, they do get stronger over time, so you want to make sure that you're updating on those and you're using the strongest versions. Because if you're not, believe me, the attackers will find it. Next is going to be different kinds of memory vulnerabilities. And we're going to start with memory leakage. Now this can happen whenever a programmer or a developer creates some kind of memory heap in development, but they forget to get rid of it. They forget to delete it or create a process to get rid of that memory heap. Now this can especially become a problem on things like daemons, which are running constantly in the background. And if it's not deleting that information, then you could actually find it in memory, and an attacker might be able to find that information and use it. But that kind of makes it hard to tackle, which is why it's so important to know what it is and to be able to find ways to assault that problem. Next is going to be an integer overflow. This basically happens whenever the result of an integer is greater than the space allocated for it. And this can happen whenever you just have certain memory constraints. You want to make sure that you are allocating enough storage space for what you're trying to do. Next is a buffer overflow, and this happens whenever memory is being written, but more memory is being written than what's available. So it starts overwriting stored memory. Again, this happens whenever you don't have proper memory management, and you're running out of memory, and then, an attacker is trying to perform some kind of action. They can delete items inside memory, which can be a real issue. And they could also cause some kind of memory leakage that will give them access to unwanted information. Next is pointer dereference. And this happens whenever you have some kind of, basically a pointer, which is pointing to a storage space, and then the pointee, I guess we'll call it, which is actually the storage space. So let's say in a pointer dereference, that pointer is no longer pointing to the correct storage space. So basically there's misalignment, memory is not being written, whatever you're trying to do that needs to be saved to memory is not being saved to memory, and that becomes a real problem, especially whenever you're running with memory intensive applications and you need to have things stored in memory. Well, pointer dereferencing can be a serious impediment to storing information over time. Next is a DLL injection, or a data link library injection. This basically runs code within the address space of another process, forcing it to load the data link library. And for those of you that don't know, a data link library is basically a stored procedure that can be referenced and used by pretty much any application or process within your machine. So an attacker can create their own data link library, put that under your system, and inject their data link library into other programs, so it'll have to be referenced at some point, especially if it's a daemon, that would be a problem. And that will basically guarantee that their program will get run. Now onto system sprawl and undocumented assets. Now this can be a big problem, especially for larger organizations, and this is why documentation is important. Because ultimately, as your network grows, as your business grows, you're going to be accumulating more and more things, right, that you're going to want to put on your network. But you have to be documenting those. You have to find processes and ways to manage those, because if you don't, then maybe you'll have an unmanaged server that's networked to everything else that could be breached, and now everything's gone. So you want to make sure that you are really staying on top of documentation. There, I said it 3 times. You have to do more documentation if you aren't already, and make sure that you are mitigating system sprawl as much as possible so attackers have just as small an attack surface as possible to work with. Next is going to be architecture and design weaknesses. Now, whenever you're building, you want to try to build thoughtfully. Now, one thing that we could think about is concentric layers defense, where the deeper into a network you go, the stronger the network will become. And so you'll want to position your more valuable assets in the middle and then kind of tier them out based on their function. And another thing could be concentric rings, where basically you have department A over here, department B over here, and maybe they overlap where they need to be sharing information and data. And that can be a very strong area of defense. But really, other than that, they're kind of segmented from one another. There are other ways that you can implement different architecture designs. That's probably going to be another video that we talk about shortly. This is just to get you familiar with what these things are. Next will be new threats and 0 days, and these come out all the time. And I mean, here in 2021, we've already seen several 0 days come out that have caused some serious problems, especially with the Hafnium Exchange attack, which used 4 different 0 days. So 0 days are basically an exploit to a vulnerability that has not been used before. It is a brand new exploit to a brand new vulnerability. Attackers are constantly trying to figure out what new 0 day they can create and use out in the world. What's the best protection from a 0 day? Well, 1, implementing best security practices, and 2, patching. Maybe it won't protect you from the initial 0 day or the initial attack, but as long as you implement the patch upon discovery, then you could mitigate further access. Next would be improper certs or key management, and this can be a real problem, especially whenever an attacker is trying to forge access and forge their identity into your network. If you have any kind of leakage with your certification storage or your key management, then an attacker could get those things and basically access other servers or nodes within your network. So you want to make sure that those are airtight. Now with that, this includes section 1.6 of the CompTIA Security Plus. Like this video if it was helpful, comment down below if you have any questions, and subscribe for more content. Thank you.